Hi, welcome everybody to this course. It's called Introduction to Service Architectures, and I'm here today with Jeffrey Richter, who I'm going to have introduce himself.
Oh, hi. I am Jeffrey Richter. I'm a Microsoft software engineer and also a co-founder of a company called Wintellect that specializes in training and consulting. But most of you would be familiar with me from the various books that I've authored over the past 20 or some years. I have my three most recent book covers up here on the slide. And down below, I have contact information if any of you would like to reach me.
All right. And I'm Boris Scholl. I'm a program manager on the Azure Compute Engineering team. I actually look after our open source development and DevOps strategy for all of our containerized workloads. I'm also responsible for the container integration with Service Fabric. And based on those topics, you probably notice I'm very passionate about distributed systems. With that, let's get started. We actually put together a very nice course for you, at least what we think is a nice course. It consists of 4 parts, and the first part is what we're going to show you in this module. It's basically Introduction to Service Architectures and the Azure Platform, and that module is really meant to set like the foundation for you, that you understand like what this is or where this is all coming from and what is it all based on. The second one, the second module, is actually about microservices patterns. And this is where we really deep dive into patterns discussions about how to build microservices and distributed applications. The third and fourth module of that course are really about showing and teaching you how to build those type of applications on Azure Container Service and on Azure Service Fabric, which is our microservices platform. With that, let's go to the agenda for today. And the agenda is, we're first going to give you an introduction, where we're coming from, or where this whole like microservices and distributed systems thing comes from. Then Jeffrey's going to talk about a services overview. You can think about it as a primer. And then we'll go into the 12-factor apps, which is a very adopted pattern, or I should almost say like a procedure for building modern cloud-based applications. Then we're going to give you a little bit container basics so that you understand what a container is and how to work with it. And then we talk about the Azure Compute Platform for microservices. So in particular, the services, the Azure Compute Services, you can build those architectures on top of. And as mentioned before, we give you a quick glance at the Azure Container Service and Azure Service Fabric. And just a quick glance, because as I mentioned before, we have deep dives coming up on those services. So with that, so why are we doing all of that? Why is everybody talking about microservices these days? And the reason is really, if you think about the software industry, or the industry has changed drastically, right? So if you think about car manufacturing, for example, a couple of years ago, car manufacturers were really concerned about, hey, what is the dashboard color, or what kind of automators should I put in, and things like that. But that has evolved. Car manufacturers nowadays, they really compete more or less on the software side, right? So how is the car connected? Can the car predict the traffic and things like that? Another example is the video industry. A couple of years ago in the US, you had Blockbuster, right? And then Netflix came along and it basically revolutionized the entire industry. So instead of going to a store now, renting a DVD, you actually just go to a website and you start watching TV. Uber is another example for those companies. All of those companies had very strict requirements. They were really customer driven, and they had to update their services independently. The services had to be always on. They had to be really agile. And that doesn't work very well with modern traditional architectures that we call monolith. So to quote Satya actually said at Convergence in 2015, which is a US conference, that every business will be a software business. And based on the examples I just gave you, you can actually see that the trend is really going there. So I briefly mentioned on the why, but there are other driving factors. So for example, you need to differentiate from the competition, right? So if there is a new feature, if you look at those competing companies in verticals, let's take the video streaming industry, you need to be able to deploy new features, new services very quickly. And those deployments shouldn't take down your existing application at all. So it shouldn't impact it, right? If something goes wrong with a deployment, it should roll back while the previous version is still in production. So by splitting out those services into smaller components and having those services being really autonomous, you're actually faster to market. You can react to customer requirements very quickly. And that's really what it is about, right? It's all about customer requirements and business requirements to get them out very quickly, very fast, in order to differentiate yourself from the competition. The same obviously goes for responding to failure. So if you look at a larger application like Netflix, you wouldn't be happy if your video streaming service went down. So if there's a problem with one particular service, you need to be, as the operator or the software vendor, you need to be able to fix that very, very quickly. And that's where this whole new architectural approach comes from. It's like reffing and updating your services independently, being super agile, super quick to market without impacting the existing entire application. So all of that requires, obviously, reliable, scalable cloud applications, and that's really what it is about today, what we talk about. We give you like the introduction to those type of applications.